1045 The Team and 1045theteam.com. We are lucky to be joined, and I say lucky, but it's really unfortunate to be joined right after what happened last night. But my heart broke, as many people in the Capital Region. Pat Cusack, Survivor 37, David versus Goliath. Thank you for joining us.
No, thank you. I appreciate for having me.
Now, this is Eric Hannmann here with 1045 The Team. We are a sports station, but we're still. I get jacked up about Survivor because it's got like sports into it, a bunch of other stuff, and from reality TV. But before we get into Survivor, I want to know your ties to the Capital Region, and I listened to a lot of pregame stuff, and it was your first time on a plane when you went out to CBS, and then the second time over to Fiji. So, talk about your ties here in Albany.
Well, I was born and raised in Cohoes, and right out of high school, having two kids right out of high school, me and my now wife, we've been together 27 years. So she's from Watervliet, and right out of high school, I became a cannoneer and raised my kids here in Watervliet.
Now, what was it like last night watching it back? Did you have any kind of, obviously you know what happens, did you have any kind of party? Was it small with just your family? And what was it like watching it back? We had a great turnout at the Black Bear here in Watervliet. My buddy Tim DeLisle, he opened up his doors, and we had a kick-ass party there last night. And just with friends and family, my wife, my kids, my mom, my dad, my brother, and all my friends. We sat at the bar, and had a great premiere party last night, and we're just seeing how it all played out, and it was a great turnout. It was a great first episode. Unfortunately, at the end of it, I was in a situation where, my time in the game came to an end. Now, one of my favorite lines from you last night was about the foliage in upstate New York, so I really appreciated that line.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you gave it right back at them. Did they think you were from New York City or something like that?
Well, anybody that's not from upstate, you tell them, hey, where are you from? New York.
Right.
Oh, you're from the big city? Yeah, well, no. I'm from a little town upstate, and, not from New York City. So, yeah,
exactly.
Everybody has the assumption that you're from the city when you say you're from New York,
Yeah, a lot of us here can relate to that.
Yeah. Yep.
Let's still talk about your background with Survivor. How long were you watching? Were you a day one watcher? And how long were you trying to be on the show?
I've watched since the very first season. And for the very first season when Richard Hatch had his business hanging out for the whole world to see. So I put myself out there. I wasn't a big social media guy.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I had no social media prior to this whole, Survivor thing. I had a flip phone. So, going on the internet, and I'm not too internet savvy, so how to work all the things on internet, how to upload videos and stuff. I never did that. But I applied, did the application online and stuff like that for a bunch of seasons. But it wasn't until last year, 2017, I went to an open casting call out in Rochester. And lo and behold, I ended up making it. So, I tell people all the time, they're like, oh, well, when I first started going through it, my wife, she was, hey, let's go, because it's like the lotto. You got to be there to win it. Mm-hmm. And if you don't put yourself out there, and if you don't go, you'll never know. So we drove out and stood in line. I was the 155th person in line. I gave him a 60-second of video, and it just rolled downhill from there, right to the islands of Fiji.
Yeah, and you're the second one from what I know. I believe Jessica Lewis on Millennials versus Gen X is from Voorheesville, I believe, or one. Yep. Yeah, so great Capital Region representation in the last 2 years on Survivor. Now let's talk about jumping into the game. Like you said, it was a great premiere last night, 90-minute premiere, and something in Survivor, like straight out of the gate, is people don't like to be seen as the leader and quote unquote bossy. But let's talk about just from the start. Did you know you wanted to take that leadership role? And obviously, your background, you were able to build a shelter. If you have the knowledge to do it, did you know you were going to do that on day one?
I didn't expect to, but when we arrived to the boat, to the big ship that was in the middle in the beginning, and we found out we were going to do a challenge right there for a shelter building kit. Of course, me being, a contractor, I'm thinking, man, if they're gonna give me tools to build us and equipment to build, and I don't have to use just a machete, then I'm gonna build that. I'm gonna build the Taj Mahal. I'm gonna put us in a good spot and build one hell of a shelter. So, I wasn't planning on taking that role, but knowing that we had the elements of Mother Nature coming in, and we had to have a roof over our head and a place to sleep, or it was going to be pure hell, I just kind of fell right into it. I'll take the lead, and I told everybody when we won the shelter building kit, I was like, we're going to have shelter. And they all looked at me like, what do you mean? I'm like, I'm a contractor. I swing a hammer for a living. And they were so grateful for it. And from what I've heard after I was out of the game, that I built one hell of a shelter. It lasted through all the cyclones, and other beaches didn't fare that well.
yeah, I'll be honest with you, man. I've watched a lot of Survivor, and there always seems to be that dodo moment when they have someone building the shelter, and it kind of not happening where people are upset, and then something goes wrong. They didn't have a lot of time, but that never happened, and it was almost like this is still day one. Look at the shelter that they built. So I believe that it was very successful. Now, obviously, we got a few confessionals and backdoor comments from it. Did you have any idea that they were kind of feeling a little bit? I don't know if they were offended, but by the leadership role you took.
I was taken back by it, because I'm in contact with everybody that all the other castaways. We've been in contact, so we're a close family. And nobody's ever brought it up, But in the game, in the moment, sometimes you don't remember what you're saying. And I think that's what, how it was out there. When you're in confessionals and you're out for your walk, you tend to say things that, they say a drunk man tells a sober man's story, but and that's kind of the situation when you're out there. You're talking in the moment. So to hear my name last night being brought up, he's being bossy, I didn't realize that I was doing that, and it probably, if I would have stayed in the game, it probably could have bit me in the ass later down the road. But I was just taking the initiative because I have the background of construction. So, I was taken off guard a little bit, but that. They were saying those feelings.
Yeah, day one on Survivor, they're always looking for an excuse to vote somebody out, and it's usually someone who's giving too much orders. And then on the other spectrum, there's the people who aren't doing much at all. And I want to talk a little bit about Nick. We saw Carl be the one who really was talking to you about it. We didn't really see many of your comments on the show, but were you as turned off by Nick not really helping out as Carl was?
Yeah, and that Nick was going home if my accident didn't happen. And because the reason why he would have been the one going home is because, he wasn't doing anything. He was kind of just hanging on the coattails and looking to claim his spot in the shelter that he wasn't helping build. He always had to be given directions. He couldn't just take the initiative to go find more bamboo. If we were running out of bamboo and we didn't have the lengths to fit for the structure, instead of just taking the initiative to go find a bigger one, he had to be told what to do next, So, me, Carl, and Davey, we were really aggravated with, his laziness around camp right off the jump.
So, on that same subject, we see a lot of times after you lose, there's some strategic talk, but it's after you lose that first challenge that things just go nuts back at camp, and obviously that wasn't able to happen. But now that you mentioned it, are you 100%? I don't know, I say 100%, but you're very certain that it would have been Nick going home and you would have survived that first vote.
Absolutely, 100%. Nick was going to go home.
So I want to talk a little bit more. I mean, this is something that Nick showed about that conversation. I believe it was on night two, I believe, where there was a lot of, we saw the David tribe really talk about their struggles. And Jeff started it off from the beginning. We saw yours being told more on the marooning when he was comparing you to, I believe, Allison it was. And
yep.
So talk a little bit about that shelter and what it was like to talking with those guys. And then if there's anything left out from your story that the show didn't necessarily portray.
In the past seasons that I've watched, you don't want to release too much to everybody too soon. Mm-hmm. As far as your lifestyle, you want to kind of try to feed them along throughout the duration of the game. Give them little bits and pieces to kind of string them along. Being that we were in with the cyclones and everything, mm-hmm. we were forced to be confined to the shelter for a majority of the time. because it's raining 3-4 inches an hour for 3 days straight. And winds ripping through 60, 70, 80 mile an hour winds, just constant. So it kind of forced us to express more than we all wanted to at that earliest stage of the game. None of us were looking forward to, I know I wasn't looking forward so early to discuss, the death of my sisters and, my upbringing. I wasn't looking to express that early in the game. I basically, going into the game, I basically had a timeline in my head to when I was going to release certain information to keep my alliance with me, and to build my trust with them. I was going to give them this, and, in a couple of days I was going to feed them this, in a couple of days I was going to feed them that, to try to build that relationship and that story with them. But unbeknownst to us, Josie decided to bring her stubborn butt amongst our shores and force us to stay in the shelter for a great portion of the time. So we got real close real quick.
Yeah, the conditions were very awful, and even during that challenge, it looked like it was a really tough challenge to run. Now, I want to go to what happened after the challenge. I'm not sure how much you can say and how much you want to share with us, but I want to go to the afterwards on the boat ride home. And if people don't really know, this is what Jeff Probst has said publicly, is that you guys go on lockdown in between the challenges. You don't walk all the way, and you can't talk to each other on the boat, so they don't show it at all on the show. But you go from camp to from the challenge to the camp, or from vice versa, or even to tribal on a boat. So I'm going to let you have the floor here, talk about your experience from leaving that challenge.
Well, we lost, obviously, and we were going to tribal. And we were on our way back down the beach, and we got aboard the boat. And, the boats aren't part of Survivor in production on an everyday game situation. You don't see the boats. So it was 15, 20-foot seas, storm. It was pouring rain. And our captain on the boat, because the boats, they're not just like a regular boat. The boats that we travel in from island to island aren't like the boat that they showed us pulling up on the side of the big boat. Mm-hmm. You're in like a galley. You're down inside the galley. There's no communication. You're on lockdown. You're not allowed to talk to each other, even though you're living together on the island. But in transportation and stuff like that, and at challenges, when lockdown goes down, there's no communication. You can't discuss game plan. You can't talk to one another or anything. And the captain of the boat had said, "Hey, look, we're going to be in some rough seas, so everybody kind of squished together to mitigate the amount of bouncing around that we're going to do in the boats and stuff like that." And then that's pretty much the extent of my memory of it. I woke up on a helicopter landing at a hospital in Suva.
Could you disclose what the injury was?
I had a spinal compression
Pat, I really appreciate you joining us. And I just want to ask you real quick, two quick questions. The first one is about, it breaks my heart, honestly. The arteries came out of my heart last night watching it, knowing you never would go to a tribal. But we know Jeff Probst, maybe he has a heart, right? If he asked you to come back, would you go back?
I'd leave tomorrow. Yeah, I would so go and play this awesome game again. And that's what I'm hoping for, and that's, again, why I say that season 37 is the prequel to my sequel.
And the last question I have for you here, we're home for New York sports. We got to talk about the Giants shirt that you were wearing. Were you home?
Absolutely.
For the New York
first player in Survivor history to bring a professional sports team on board.
Yeah. We're going to call you
other than
New York
Boston
Pat.
Rob's Boston hat.
Right.
But so big Giants fan, I bleed blue. So started off rough so far this year, but
right.
we're finding our stride.
Pat, I really appreciate you coming on, talking to me. The people in the Capital Region are really going to love hearing this, and we'll see you around the Capital Region.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.